Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacey and Phil Thompson.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacey.
And my name is Phil Thompson, and we come to you every week. We are with a company called JSL Solutions, and we do mainly tech work for churches such as
StreamingChurch.tv
and ChurchAppLive.com
and MyFlock.com.
And those are our little companies that do streaming video, mobile apps, and websites plus church management stuff. So, and we talk on our podcast about tech stuff, tech-related things, but we also talk a lot about ministry activities, ministry stuff, leadership.
Yeah, mainly leadership-related things, I guess.
Yeah. So because that's kind of our background. Steve and I both have a background of ministry, church work. Mine's a lot of it's pastoral, and Steve has been involved in board of directors.
Yeah, boards and other leadership teams and that sort of thing.
All that good stuff. So today, what are we going to talk about?
So today we're going to talk about 10 signs your ministry is sick, or at least not as healthy as it should be.
So I guess the new word today for some of the kids are using is "that's sick."
Oh,
Have you heard that?
Oh, that's been around for a while.
Has it? See, I'm out of date. So I guess when they say "that's sick," that's a positive thing, right?
Yes, it's a very positive thing.
But we're not really saying that we're not talking about positive stuff here, although you can turn it around and make it positive. But the 10 signs that your ministry
10 ways to make your ministry sick.
Yeah, there you go.
It depends on how you say sick, too. So.
All right. So, see, you got teenage boys, or had them. I guess they're all...
Yeah, they're older
one
now.
Of them's teenage now, right? Everybody else is grown up.
That is true, yeah. They are all out of their teens, except for the one.
I remember your wife's, in the email, one of her first emails was, what, Mom, 4 boys?
That's correct.
You guys have 4 boys. I only have 1. But enough about us. Let's talk about me. No, we want to talk about. So Steve and I have both worked with churches, businesses, organizations, and we have observed over the years some good organizations, some good churches, but we've also observed some churches and ministries that are having some issues, some health-related issues. Things aren't very good, and so we want to share with you 10 signs that some things you probably should maybe review with your church or your ministry, and take a look at it and see if some of this may apply to you, and maybe you can fix some of it.
Right.
Does that make sense? So,
yep.
All right. So what's the first?
So number 1 on our list is inattention to organizational health. So it's basically not paying attention to this topic of is your organization doing well?
Yeah, it's it's very easy, and this has been the case, because I've done church work and you have too. In fact, one of the churches I was involved in, there was a big sign up that used to say it's all about the weekend, and the weekend is Saturday evening service, church service, and then some Sunday morning services. And that's very important. I mean, obviously, your church services are very important. We've talked about on this podcast before. It's really important to have a good, solid service or services. Because you're attracting people, you want to minister to people. But it's not really all about the weekend, because you got stuff going on during the week.
Yeah, if you alienate your staff or your organization in that process to create the weekend, then it's only going to last so long before the wheels fall off.
Yeah, or you may put together a good presentation on Sunday, but you may have some other issues lurking during the week. And so it again, we talk about this a lot, but it's really having to do with relationships. Relationships with your staff, relationships with your volunteers, things going on with your congregation. I mean, if you're not addressing needs during the week, somehow, some way.
Right. Or addressing conflicts that can occur as well. I know I've been a part of some organizations where there's some internal conflict that if it doesn't get resolved, eventually leads to either people leaving the organization or a split or something like that.
Yep, absolutely. And I had this happen. I was a senior pastor, and I actually had a church split. And And I tried. Maybe I didn't do as good of a job as I thought. I really did try to work on some issues that we were having, and the other party just didn't really want to cooperate. But you've got to at least put some effort into what's happening during the week with your people,
Mm-hmm.
and keep an eye on that. And that, if people have prayer requests, I mean, with what we do, and I think your church does this too, Steve, because I was involved in it for years, and that is, people have prayer requests, they fill out a connection card, have a prayer request, have a need, or want to get involved in something, and if that's not being taken care of during the week or not handling well, it's just not healthy. It's for your
Mm-hmm.
congregation, for your people. And then, as you just said earlier, your staff or your volunteers, need attention. So it's not just about the weekend, although the weekend is important. It's also about the other things.
Right. So a lot of times, I think leaders will say, like, we need a morale event or something like that, interjecting to try to get, to correct any problems that are going on or address. I mean, I think a real key one is just address any conflict. And then also create those morale events as well, though. Yeah. That are helpful.
Here's a tip that I did, and actually kind of got this from your lead pastor, Jeff Love, many, many, many years ago. You guys don't do this anymore, but we do a thing once a month, Sunday evenings, and we do a thing where we invite volunteers or even people that are interested in our church or interested, have come a few times and they want to maybe get to know some of the leadership team a little more, ask questions. And so people can bring refreshments, bring snacks, and we have kind of an informal meeting, very informal, where we just kind of gather with our snacks, our drinks, and we may address a few things in the future, stuff coming up that we want people to know about. We do a volunteer appreciation once a month, so we actually give a little gift certificate to a volunteer that has excelled.
Uh-huh.
And we also we also give people an opportunity to rub shoulders with our leadership team, our senior pastor, myself, since I'm involved with the church, and ask questions, in front of everybody. Or, if you're not comfortable asking a question, then, ask a little bit later,
Nice.
grab somebody in the corner and say, hey, why do you guys do this?
I was part of a church in California that it was actually part of their denomination, and they would have what they called the monthly meeting.
Okay.
And where they would bring, it wasn't, I think, limited to the leadership of the church, but typically it was the more committed people, and they'd meet once a month and kind of have I guess you call it a business meeting, but it was not quite as formal as a business meeting would be.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like what we're doing at my church, and I think it's helpful. Yeah,
it's a good thing.
And that way, because everybody's going all sorts of different directions, so it's easy for your organizational health to kind of go downhill if you're not catching some of these things. But at least you're giving people an opportunity to connect. It's only once a month, and they get to connect, and that way you can always say later too, like if somebody has a problem, you can always say, hey, how come you didn't talk to us about this? We gave you an opportunity, So anyhow, all right. So in attention to the health of your church organizationally is certainly a sign that if you're not doing this, you could have some issues. So what's the next point?
So the next on our list, number 2, is adrenaline addiction.
Adrenaline addiction. What does that mean? Well,
it sounds pretty serious.
Well, it is. So I have worked with some guys before who really their life is driven by crisis. What's coming up next? Oh my gosh, we got to run here and fix this issue, and they kind of go back and forth fixing issues. And what happens is you miss the big picture. So if you're always running around putting out fires,
right,
and some of them may not need to be put out by you, maybe somebody else should handle it.
Yeah, I spent many years in the aerospace business, and there were those that thrived and actually were rewarded for putting out fires. And it was often rumored that probably a lot of the time, those that were putting out the fires were the ones that were also starting the fires. So they just thrived on having a crisis to deal with for the day. Yeah. And it may not be, it was always urgent, but it never was important.
Yeah.
And they'd be this, the hero, because they'd come in and solve that problem that they may have had a little something to do with creating in the beginning.
Well, and you do have to put out fires, and in any kind of be a business or, we have things around here that pop up that we have to rush to.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
It happens, but if you're just constantly doing this, you need to maybe delegate it to somebody else, or at least slow down and get the big picture. So, the way to solve this would be, what kind of a tool do you use to kind of manage your day, manage your weeks, manage your months, and have these things on there, the things that need to be dealt with, make sure they're on there on your list, and then make sure you get to them somehow, some way, and don't let yourself be going back and forth.
Right.
Some people really do like that.
And a lot of times you don't want to be overwhelmed by the urgent and ignore the important.
Yep. So good. So the third point is we talk about health of your church or organization is leadership disunity.
Yes.
It's a tough thing. It's hard sometimes. If your church is led by a team, and I, again, we're speaking to all sorts of different churches here, different cultures in their churches, but most churches you may have your senior pastor may kind of lead things, but you probably have a team or a board of directors or whatever you call them that are, involved at least hopefully to some degree, because I think it's important. But if you have a team that is just not in any kind of unity, you're going to have problems.
Right.
It's a no-brainer. Leadership team disunity. I've seen it happen. You have too. And it usually ends up being just a gridlock on things. So how do you do that? How do you fix that? And that's not an easy question, but it does take maintenance. It takes some time by the senior leader, by the person that's really in charge of things.
Right.
For
I think
the
we may be
church.
talking about, well, we have another item here that some of these are related as well. Yeah. So, part of this, and we're going to talk more about this later, is if there's a different vision from a member of the leadership team than the central vision of the church, then that can lead to some problems. And so you got to get in there and try to do some alignment.
Well, I think I think that's a big part. The other thing too is sometimes when somebody's irritated about something, when they're upset about something the church has done or you've done as a pastor or something, sometimes if it just gets in their crawl, they tend to get nitpicky about other stuff. Other issues that maybe they shouldn't be so nitpicky about, but because there's something else that's got them mad or angered or frustrated.
Yeah, it influences their attitude, and
changes the
flows
attitude
into all kinds of things.
And you end up with somebody that ends up nitpicking everything. And I've seen this happen. So again, the way you try to hopefully fix that would be, you take the person out to coffee or something, or lunch or something, and try to figure out, okay, where are they coming from on this? What's the issue behind the issue?
Right.
Kind of a thing. And I think if you can get to that can certainly help if you're talking with one or two people.
Yeah. But this disunity, as most of these things, there are symptoms that can cause, the ultimate failure of your ministry. So there's things that you want to address.
Yeah.
All right. So next on our list,
artificial harmony. So this is kind of the other side of the coin here. Artificial harmony. And by the way, a lot of this we're talking about is put together by an old friend of mine, Tony Morgan, who has worked with businesses and churches. And the problem with artificial harmony here is, especially when you're working with churches and stuff, is that people think that you can't necessarily disagree, with anything. That you've got to kind of put it out there and put on the good face. And it's kind of a misguided idea that you can't be frustrated or you can never disagree. And so we're not saying, when we talk about unity, we're not saying that you just nod your head and everybody just kind of goes along for the ride. I think there's healthy ways to have disagreements.
Right. This would be an environment where you have individuals that are, saluting the flag, but kind of outwardly showing that they're in harmony, but inwardly they have some issues.
And it can also come out in other ways too. So you end up undermining if you're, again, it kind of gets back to the disunity thing. If you just stuff it so long, okay, I'm going to agree, I'm just going to go along with it. But after a while, it will come out manifest in other ways.
Yeah, this is a way of getting to the authentic self of each of your leaders, and try to drive down to make sure that everyone that's participating is being authentic.
Right. Well, I think, and again, I think if you're having team leadership team meetings, board meetings, whatever you want to call it, what's the other thing that a lot of churches that use the word for committees or whatever, I don't like those words. But if you're going to have those meetings with people, I think you do need to give opportunities for people to share how they feel about something. So, and they need to have the liberty to disagree. And so I think you need to say that to your team or to your board.
This is really a senior leadership thing where you want to encourage. You don't want to set a vision that creates an environment where people are afraid to raise some issue. Yeah. You want to create an environment where everyone can participate and voice their opinion.
Yeah. I just was reading about a mega church on the West Coast. It's going through a lot right now, and part of that was the people really weren't allowed to disagree, with anything. And so it's kind of all falling apart for them now, unfortunately. But
you're talking Mars Hill, I think, right?
I didn't mention that by name. We have to edit that out. But I mean, there's accusations with Mars Hill. The accusations from past leaders, they couldn't, they had to salute the flag and go with the party line on everything. That they didn't have the freedom to disagree with certain policies or certain ideas. And so I think you need to create a culture or an environment that allows people to say, hey, this is what I think. And they need to be accepted. I mean, you don't agree with them necessarily, but you know what? Okay, that's your opinion. Let's talk that out a little bit.
It's a healthy thing. There's some former politicians that once they got into office were assigning opposing political viewpoint people just to balance, to get, to not create an environment where it's, it's just, they can learn from each other.
Yeah, it really is. So again, that as we get into some of these points here, it does take some work. It takes some effort, but it's well worth the effort. I have seen it work successfully. And so I think that moving on here, you can really get some health back into where things maybe were not so healthy.
All right. So we've got, in addition to organizational health, adrenaline addiction, leadership team disunity, and then we just talked about artificial harmony. Mm-hmm. So the next is prioritizing consensus.
Right. So, when a leadership team here, when leadership teams wait for a consensus before taking action, they usually end up, with decisions that are made far too late, and it's a recipe for mediocrity and just frustration. So I think that you have to create the environment of let's get input here, let's talk about this, but then there's going to have to be some decisions made.
Right. And there's a balance here, right? Because you don't want to drive off your own way too quickly, but then you don't want to wait for.
You can't. And I think people on your team, your board, whatever we're calling this, they need to understand this. Okay, I may not always get my own way because I disagree with so-and-so about this, but it's okay if I don't get my own way. But as long as, you've given that person the freedom to voice their concerns, voice their thoughts, they're in unity, but they may disagree on certain points, but, at least they get that opportunity to air that out, and they have to realize, okay, we've got to make a decision on this, and we can't just go on forever. Right. We've got to make it. So, consensus is prioritizing consensus. It's really, we need to move on here eventually, you know what I mean? And not just stay stuck in this disagreement forever.
All right. So number 6 on our list.
Number 6, not answering the key questions. And there are 6 critical questions that your organization, your church needs to ask. The first one is,
why do we exist?
Why do we exist? Let's just read them through here. The second one is, how do we behave? The third one is, what do we do? The fourth one is,
how will we succeed?
And the fifth one is, what is most important right now? And then the last one is, who must do what? So here's where everybody gets jumbled up on these things. It's easy to do. But you might say, well, we're talking about a church here. Why do we exist? Well, you might define that. Why do you exist? Because different churches reach different people. There's different purposes, different visions behind church. And I'm not really going to get into that because there's so many different churches that are a part of, listening to this that, I can't tell you why you exist exactly. But there may be an emphasis on reaching your inner city. There might be an emphasis, a different
Right.
purpose, the vision behind it. But why do you exist? And then how do we behave? So how do we make this happen? How do we, carry out what our purpose is?
Right. And this will help. I mean, you get the answers to this, and this is going to make answers to other questions a lot more obvious.
What do we do? And again, your church is going to be doing different things from other churches. How will we succeed? I mean, if I'm setting up a church in the inner city, how that church succeeds may be different than how your church succeeds in, suburban, whatever,
Right.
Connecticut. You know what I mean? There's going to be a different purpose or different way to make things work. I was in a small town when I was a senior pastor, and what I did in that small town for my church to succeed is actually somewhat different than what I was doing here in Tucson, Arizona. We have got about 1 million people here. In my city I was in had about 15,000 people. So the way I approached it was a little different. Some of the principles are the same, but
Right.
specifically, how we succeed in a small town of 15,000 people versus how do you succeed in a town of 1 million or 2 million people. So
Right.
differences there. What is most important right now? So again, it's not just chasing the adrenaline rush, like we said earlier. It's not just putting out the fires all the time, but what's the most important thing right now? And again, it's looking at your priorities, the big picture, I think, and then who must do what. This is a big deal. People get confused on this all the time. If you got a team, you've got to define people's roles.
All right. You need to establish some accountability and have some.
Yeah.
Spread the workload out a little bit.
Yeah, because I've been on board meetings where there's certain board members thought, well, this is our job to do this, and it's like, no, it's not. It's the staff's job. And unless you have some kind of a document, or you need to have some kind of a governing document that helps people understand that. We're talking boards and teams here in this specific case.
Right.
There needs to be some roles defined. Otherwise, they will crisscross all the time.
Right.
And then you get frustration, anger, and resentment.
Right. So this is just kind of a grounding of the facts.
Yeah. So answer the key questions. If you don't answer those key questions, your church, your ministry, your business may not be as healthy as it should be.
All right. So the next one on the list.
Being all things to all people. This is, inclusiveness is a good thing as far as trying to reach people from different backgrounds. But the truth is, you've got to get to your core values. You've got to get to what makes you different from other churches, and do what you do best, and don't try to do something that maybe somebody else is better at.
Right. That's true. I mean, there's the saying that if 10% of the people aren't upset with you, then you're not doing anything. So
yeah,
just know that not everyone's going to be aligned with you, and maybe there's a better fit for of a church for them somewhere else, and because you don't want to dilute your ministry down to the point where it serves no one, and by serving everyone.
Yeah. Examples of this, I don't know. The things that come into my mind are maybe your church has a food pantry. Great thing. All right. And then, you see somebody that's got a food pantry at their church. Let me back that up a little bit. Let's say there's a church in town that does a great job with helping the poor. Every church should be doing this, but has a really specific ministry of food pantry or whatever. And you look at that and you say, oh, our church should do that too. But you're just not equipped. You don't have the people. You don't have the resources that maybe this other church
may not
does.
Have the heart for that.
You may not really have the heart for it. And again, I'm not saying you don't help people, but there are certain things you can do better than maybe somebody else can, and they can do better than you can.
Right, exactly.
And you try to do it all, especially if you're smaller or whatever, you're just
not going to do it well.
It's going to be frustrating.
Right.
Very frustrating. So, all right.
So number 8.
Poor vision casting. I'm real big on this.
Yeah. So this ties into, it overlaps with several of the other ones as well.
Yeah.
But, vision casting, and, it's kind of ties into the answering the key questions piece as well. But you want to make sure that you've got a clear vision and that everyone understands that vision, and those that are committed to your leadership are committed to that vision as well.
Tony Morgan says, great leaders see themselves as chief reminding officers as much as anything else. So what happens is many leaders fail to, what the term could be used, over communicate, because they get bored saying the same thing over and over again. But the truth is most people don't hear it as much. And so the vision that if you're the senior pastor listening here, you need to continue to remind your team, your church, overall, what is your vision? Cast a vision and keep casting it over and over again. Yeah, maybe you could say it a little differently at times, different ways to say it, but you've got to get it out there because people, they don't hear it right away. It takes them a while. It's like TV commercials. Well, I don't know what the latest stat is, but there was a study that you had to see the commercial 7 times before you thought about buying the product. I think I've heard stats about the gospel. People don't necessarily make any kind of a commitment to Christ unless they hear the message, I think 6 or 7 times. Mm-hmm. I think the same way with vision. You have to get it out there and remind people.
Yeah, keep repeating it until it's really sunk in.
Yeah, it really is true. And again, if you're the guy that's always thinking about the vision of your church, it sometimes gets a little boring for you. But again, people don't necessarily, they're not always in your head. Usually they're not in your head, so you have to remind them. So, all right, so moving on. We got a couple more minutes. Hiring the wrong people. Another sign that your church is maybe unhealthy or moving towards or not as healthy as it should be, hiring the wrong people.
Yeah, so there's the image of having the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats on the bus, that whole, where do we get that from? There's
it's an analogy that
some leader I thought was making it really popular.
I always say it's John Maxwell, but I don't know if it was.
I don't know who it's attributed to, but yeah.
Zig Ziglar, I don't know.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you have the right people on the bus and they're sitting in the right spots on the bus.
Yeah. I have seen this time and time again. And here's another part, too, and this is really hard for people, and that is if your church is growing, as it grows, it's just like your kids, they grew, they change as they grow. So your church grows. As your church grows, it also changes. And so sometimes, this is the hard part about this, sometimes the people that got you to a certain level can't get you to the next. They're great people. They just don't have the ability to get you to the next level on a certain team or maybe within the organization. Sometimes you got to make a change.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
That's tough, yeah.
It's very hard, but it's important because otherwise you'll stay stuck.
Right.
And that's a whole other subject. But hiring the wrong people, that's a faux pas. But then sometimes to add to that, as you grow and change, sometimes there needs to be changes made in your personnel, your staff, maybe even volunteers. Maybe one volunteer needs to move into a different area. And again, very hard to do, but having a healthy church is not easy. Otherwise, every church would be very healthy. And
that's true.
So it takes effort. All right. So last but not least.
So number 10, ineffective meetings.
Oh, gosh, another one that drives me nuts.
So I think everybody can relate to this, though, right?
Yeah. I don't know. There are very few people I know that like meetings. And I don't like to have a lot of meetings, although meetings are necessary. I'm going to quote Tony Morgan again. Tony says, if someone were to offer me one single piece of evidence to evaluate the health of an organization or church, I would not ask to see its financial statements, review its product line, or even talk to its employees or customers. I would want to observe the leadership team during a meeting. My goodness. That's true, though. Yes. I think it's true. How's things go in your meeting? Are you effective? Are you getting stuff done? Are you getting bogged down?
Right. And there's some models out there for an effective meeting. I guess we have a reference to Patrick.
Yeah.
Is that Lynn Keone's book, Death by Meeting?
Yep.
So I'm sure one of the key elements is you have an agenda that is known prior to the meeting and that you stick to that agenda.
Yeah, the book is called Death by Meeting. Yeah, you want to have an agenda in advance if you can. You want to give people an opportunity to give input to that agenda. With email today, that should be pretty easy to do. Get it out early enough, give people an opportunity to have some input on the agenda.
Yeah, there's lots of resources for holding good quality meetings.
There is, and then somebody's got to be leading the meeting overall. So your CEO or your chairman of the board or your executive pastor, or maybe it's your senior pastor that leads the meeting. I don't know. But that person has to kind of stay on top of things and make sure the meeting flows and you get through some things. We're out of time.
All right.
So
great.
Folks, thanks. If you have a question or maybe some input on this thing, we're not always right about everything. 90% of the time we are, but no, we're not. We don't believe that. But if you have some
80-20.
There you go. Email support@streamingchurch.tv is a way you can get a hold of us. You can check us out at newmediaministries.tv. You can go to streamingchurch.tv as well. Go to iTunes. Give us a nice review. Or
YouTube, is that right? Did you say that
We're
one?
on YouTube too. Yeah, you can go to YouTube. It's under church. It's probably my old YouTube account. Phil Thompson Live, I think, is my old YouTube account. We have a lot of that on there. But there's lots of ways you can connect with us. And I mentioned iTunes just a second ago. Give us a review. I mean, let us know what you think. If you don't like us, that's okay. We'd love to hear from you anyhow. And if we can help you, if any questions, tech related or ministry related, that's what we're here for. So, all right. We're out of time. Thank you for spending some time with us today, folks. Steve, appreciate you.
All right. Great being here.
All right. We will catch you next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. Have a great day.